Hey guys, tonight we are drifting back, way back, to the heart of 17th century Mughal India. Imagine the scene. The sun has long dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fading orange, and you're about to step into a world so lavish, so overflowing with riches, spices, and intricate rules that it makes modern celebrity lifestyles look like a minimalist camping trip. We're going to explore what it was like to prepare for and experience dinner in a Mughal palace. Think less what's in the fridge, and more which of my 1,000 chefs will prepare the ambrosia of the gods tonight, and will it be served on gold plates or just, gem-encrusted silver? It's a world of intoxicating aromas, shimmering silks, and enough culinary firepower to feed a small city. And speaking of survival, let's be honest, with the medical practices of the time, the complex courtly intrigues, and the sheer chance of offending someone very powerful with a stray glance, you probably wouldn't survive this experience for long. A rogue chili, a misinterpreted compliment, and boom, you're diplomatic incident fodder. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps the channel more than you know. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where you're all tuning in from tonight. Drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see our little community spread across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air grows cooler as you approach, the dust of the day's travel settling around your weary feet. You're not entirely sure what time it is, only that the stars are fiercely bright in the inky sky, undiluted by the glow of modern cities. Ahead, rising like a titan from the earth, are the colossal walls of the imperial palace. They are not just walls, they are declarations, built from deep red sandstone, or perhaps pale, ghostly marble, depending on which great Mughal city we've landed in tonight. Agra, Delhi, Lahore, each with its own magnificent fortress. Let's imagine Delhi, Shah Jahanabad, the city built by Emperor Shah Jahan, the same man who commissioned the Taj Mahal. These walls are stories in stone, stretching upwards, easily 30 feet or more, high enough to make a giraffe reconsider its career choices as a lookout. As you draw nearer, the general hum of the city beyond these ramparts begins to fade, replaced by a different set of sounds. There's the rhythmic thud of heavy boots on stone, the palace guards, their forms silhouetted by flickering torches set into iron sconces along the battlements. You can hear the occasional snort of a horse, the jingle of harness, and a low murmur of voices speaking in languages that dance on the edge of your understanding: Persian, the courtly language, and various Hindustani dialects. The main entrance, perhaps the famed Lahori Gate or Delhi Gate of the Red Fort, isn't just an opening. It's a monumental statement, an archway so grand it could swallow a small fleet of modern-day trucks, flanked by imposing octagonal towers. These gates were designed not just for passage, but for procession, for the grand entries of the emperor himself, often atop a magnificently caparised elephant. The air itself seems to change. The common smells of the city, wood smoke, cooking fires from 1,000 homes, the scent of animals and dust, begin to mingle with something far more refined. There's a subtle sweetness, perhaps from jasmine and roses blooming in unseen gardens within the palace precincts. And beneath that, an almost imperceptible waft of something rich and savory, a teasing precursor to the culinary wonders being concocted deep inside. It's the kind of smell that makes your stomach rumble, even if you thought you weren't hungry. You also catch the distinct, slightly metallic and earthy scent of dampness from the chhajas or projecting eaves, where water might have been sprinkled to cool the air. You are not alone in this approach. Even at this late hour, there's a sense of controlled movement. Perhaps a minor noble and his retinue are also seeking entry, their palanquins swaying gently, carried by liveried bearers. You see torchbearers, their flames casting dancing shadows that make the already imposing architecture seem alive and breathing. The security is, as you might expect, incredibly tight. Getting into this place makes Fort Knox look like a public library with a slightly sticky door. Guards armed with spears, swords, and perhaps even matchlock firearms scrutinize everyone. Their uniforms are elaborate, a riot of color and fabric, designed to impress as much to identify. Some historians note that the specific attire and even the color of the turbans could denote rank and regiment, a visual language of imperial authority. As you reach the first checkpoint, a call rings out. Voices are raised, a brief exchange occurs. There's a whole protocol to this. You can't just stroll in. Your arrival, your identity, your purpose, all of this would have been communicated, probably multiple times, through a chain of officials. Historians still argue whether the elaborate bureaucracy of the Mughal court, which extended even to gatekeeping, was a marvel of organization for its time or a stifling web of intricate procedures that sometimes hindered smooth administration. It probably depended on whether you were the one trying to get an urgent message through, or the one whose job it was to meticulously record every person who passed the third cobblestone from the left. You might notice the sheer craftsmanship even here at the outer defenses. The intricate carvings on the wooden gates reinforced with massive iron bosses and spikes. Beautiful, yet utterly formidable. There's a quirky little detail you might spot. Small, almost hidden niches near the guard posts. What were they for? Perhaps for small oil lamps, or maybe a place for a guard to stash a quick snack, a piece of dried fruit or a handful of nuts to get through a long watch. Or, knowing the human tendency for superstition, maybe a tiny protective talisman. The Mughals were, after all, a fascinating blend of the highly sophisticated and the deeply traditional. The sounds become more distinct now. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer from a distant workshop within the palace complex, for the palace was a city in itself, with its own artisans and service providers. The distant, almost mournful cry of a muezzin from a minaret somewhere beyond the walls, calling for the late-night prayer, and perhaps the faint strains of music. The Nabat Khana, or drum house, located near the main gates of major Mughal forts, would traditionally play music at set times of the day, a practice that underscored the emperor's presence and sovereignty. Even now, you might hear the lingering resonance of the evening's last performance, a ghostly melody hanging in the air. You are guided forward through the initial gate and into a vast courtyard. The scale is breathtaking. The stars above seem brighter now, framed by the high walls surrounding this open space. More guards, more officials. The process of entry is layered, like peeling an onion, each layer revealing a deeper level of the palace's inner workings. There's a sense of anticipation, of moving from an outer, more public sphere into an increasingly restricted and sacred space. The air is thick with the weight of power, of history being made and unmade within these very confines. The very ground you walk on has felt the tread of emperors, queens, ambitious nobles, and hopeful petitioners. It's a humbling thought to be a tiny speck in such a grand, unfolding drama. And this, you realize, is only the beginning of the journey. You haven't even smelled the kitchens properly yet.
And then you do. The scent, which was a mere teasing whisper at the outer gates, now grows into a full-throated chorus as you are guided through another series of archways and perhaps down a slightly less grand corridor. It's a warm, enveloping cloud of aromas, roasting meats, fragrant rice, a symphony of spices being toasted and ground, the sweet perfume of baking bread, and the sharp tang of onions and garlic hitting hot oil. It's intoxicating, and it pulls you forward like an invisible string. The air here is noticeably warmer, vibrating with a palpable energy that contrasts with the stately, cooler ambiance of the courtyards you just passed. You are approaching the Matbakhi Amira, the imperial kitchens, and kitchen feels like a woefully inadequate word. This isn't just a room where food is made, it's an entire district, a sprawling complex of buildings, courtyards, and storehouses dedicated to the singular, sacred purpose of feeding the emperor and his vast household. As you get closer, the sounds intensify. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal as massive pots are scrubbed or ingredients are chopped. The sizzle and spit of things frying, the roar of fires in enormous clay ovens, and a cacophony of voices shouting orders and responses. It's louder than a debate club for particularly passionate foghorns. Yet, amidst what seems like utter chaos, there's an underlying rhythm, a sense of frenetic, purposeful activity. You step through a wide arched doorway, and the scene that unfolds before you is astounding. Imagine a space almost as large as a small marketplace, bustling with hundreds of people. Steam billows from gigantic copper and earthenware cauldrons, some so large a person could comfortably bathe in them, though hopefully not during dinner prep. Fires blaze in countless hearths and ovens, casting a flickering orange glow on the smoke-stained walls and the sweating faces of the cooks. It's the kind of heat that makes you wonder if they're cooking dinner or forging a new set of crown jewels on the side. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we joked about in ancient Egypt? You might wish you had some less organic alternative right about now. This is the engine room of the palace, and it's a highly specialized operation. The sheer number of staff is mind-boggling. The Aini Akbari, that invaluable record from Emperor Akbar's reign a century or so before our 17th century setting, but the grand scale persisted and likely expanded, mentions hundreds of kitchen personnel. There are cooks or bawarchis everywhere, identifiable by their aprons and perhaps simple caps, their movements quick and economical despite the crush. But it's not just a crowd of general cooks. Oh no, the Mughals loved specialization. There are separate masters for different categories of food. One group might be solely responsible for the various types of pulaus and biryanis, another for the rich meat kormas and kalias. There are bakers, the nanbais, tending to the tandoors, slapping dough against the scorching clay walls to produce fragrant naans, rotis, and sheermals. You half expect to find a designated chief officer of parsley sprinkling, so specialized is the setup. Then there are the kebabchis, masters of grilling and roasting, their skewers laden with spiced meats, sizzling over glowing coals. You see men, their muscles slick with sweat, grinding spices on huge stone slabs, the rhythmic scrape and thump adding to the percussive soundtrack of the kitchen. Others are meticulously chopping mountains of vegetables, their knives a blur of motion. There are mewaz arkhans, fruit keepers, abdars, water coolers and preparations of drinks, and even tarkashdars, vegetable preparers. Each person has a role, a station, a specific cog in this enormous culinary machine. Historians still argue whether this high degree of specialization led to unparalleled culinary excellence through focused expertise, or if it sometimes resulted in a lack of flexibility and innovation across different sections of the kitchen.
You notice the different sections within this vast space. One area might be dedicated to butchery, with carcasses being expertly broken down. Another corner is for dairy, with fresh yogurt, paneer, and ghee being prepared or portioned. The air here is thick with the smell of clarified butter. Ghee was a cornerstone of Mughal cooking, used in vast quantities. It's said that some imperial kitchens had enormous vessels specifically for storing ghee, and the consumption was legendary. Perhaps a quirky tidbit for you. It wasn't uncommon for valuable or easily pilfered ingredients like saffron, musk, or perhaps even certain rare spices from the Spice Islands to be kept under lock and key by a trusted official, sometimes even sealed, only to be opened and measured out under strict supervision. It speaks volumes about the value of these ingredients and, well, human nature.
Water carriers or beasties scurried back and forth with their heavy goatskin bags, supplying the endless need for water, for cooking, for drinking, after purification of course, and for the constant cleaning that must take place, even amidst this organized mayhem. The logistics are staggering. Imagine the sheer volume of firewood or charcoal needed to keep all these fires burning, the mountains of raw ingredients processed daily. You see officials, perhaps deputies of the Mir Bakawal, the superintendent of the kitchen, whom we'll meet later, moving through the throngs, tasting, inspecting, and occasionally barking orders, their expressions intense and focused. There's no room for error when you're preparing food for the Padshah, the emperor himself. The equipment is as impressive as the scale of operation. Copper pots, tinned on the inside to prevent poisoning, gleam dully in the firelight. There are brass trays, stone mortars and pestles of all sizes, long-handled ladles, and a bewildering array of knives and cleavers. You might see dough being kneaded in enormous troughs, or rice being washed in specially designated areas, the water running off in carefully constructed channels. It's a world away from a quiet domestic kitchen. This is industry, albeit an industry dedicated to the art of taste. Despite the seeming chaos, there's a flow. Raw ingredients come in, are processed, cooked, and then plated or arranged on large trays, ready to be transported to the next stage of their journey towards the imperial dining spread. There's a constant movement, a current of activity that pulls you along. You try to stay out of the way, an observer in this whirlwind of culinary creation, marveling at the coordination and sheer effort involved. The faces you see are a mixture of intense concentration, practiced skill, and perhaps a touch of weary resignation that comes from working in such a demanding, high-pressure environment. Yet there's also pride. To be a cook in the emperor's kitchen was a position of considerable skill, and for the masters, of prestige. The culinary reputation of the empire rested on their shoulders, one perfectly spiced dish at a time. Now, for those skilled cooks to weave their magic to create dishes worthy of the emperor's discerning palate, they needed ingredients. And not just any ingredients. The Mughal pantry was a treasure chest filled with the finest produce, grains, meats, and spices drawn from every corner of the vast empire and, indeed, from lands far beyond its borders. The culinary reputation we just mentioned didn't just rely on skill. It relied on a supply chain that was a marvel of 17th century logistics and sheer imperial clout. Standing in that bustling kitchen, surrounded by the immediate, intense reality of cooking, it's easy to forget the incredible journeys these components have made. Think about the spices that form the very soul of Mughal cuisine. The black pepper, sharp and aromatic, might have undertaken a perilous sea voyage from the Malabar coast in the south. Cloves, with their warm, pungent sweetness, likely traveled from the distant spice islands of Indonesia, passing through numerous hands and markets before reaching the imperial storerooms. That peppercorn on your plate, it's probably seen more of the world than most people of the era, a tiny, spicy globetrotter. Cinnamon could have come from Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, and cardamom from the Western Ghats. Saffron, that precious spice worth more than its weight in gold, painting dishes with its vibrant yellow hue and unique flavor, was painstakingly harvested from the delicate crocuses grown in the cool, high-altitude fields of Kashmir, an imperial territory the Mughals cherished. The effort to transport these delicate threads without damage or loss of aroma was immense. Then there's the produce. The Mughals were connoisseurs of fruits. Emperors like Babur, the founder of the dynasty, famously missed the fruits of his homeland in Central Asia, and his descendants made sure their tables were laden with the best. Luscious melons and grapes from Kabul and Kandahar, prized for their sweetness, would be carefully packed and transported, often by swift horsemen or camel trains. Mangoes were an imperial obsession. They didn't just have mangoes, they had a mango for every mood, every occasion, probably even a mango that could predict the weather. Okay, maybe not the last one, but emperors like Akbar and Jahangir took a keen personal interest in cultivating and grafting hundreds of varieties, each with its unique flavor profile. Special orchards across the empire, from Bengal to the Deccan, were dedicated to supplying the court. And what about keeping things cool in the searing heat of the Indian plains? The imperial household enjoyed chilled drinks and desserts thanks to a remarkable feat of logistics, the regular supply of ice and snow from the distant Himalayas. Imagine caravans of mules or fast runners working in relays, carrying heavily insulated blocks of ice wrapped in blankets and straw, traveling hundreds of miles. It's like the world's most extreme artisanal ice delivery service. Your frozen water, Your Majesty, hand-chipped by a Yeti and express-shipped by Eagle. Almost. This ice wasn't just for cooling drinks. It was used in the preparation of certain dishes and for preserving perishables. A mainstream historical fact is that the system was surprisingly efficient, ensuring a steady supply, at least for the uppermost echelons of the court. Fresh vegetables arrived daily from market gardens situated around the city, and also from dedicated imperial gardens or bogs, which were not just sources of produce but pleasure grounds for the royalty. These gardens would cultivate a wide array of greens, gourds, beans, and root vegetables, sometimes including exotic varieties introduced from other lands. Historians still argue whether the intense horticultural demands of the Mughal court significantly stimulated wider agricultural innovation and diversification across the empire, or if its benefits were largely confined to the elite circles. The rivers, like the Yamuna flowing past Agra and Delhi, provided fish. There are accounts of specialized fishermen tasked with supplying the imperial kitchen, and sometimes, quite ingeniously, live fish were transported in water-filled containers to ensure absolute freshness. A tricky business involving aeration and careful handling, a quirky tidbit of aquatic engineering for the dinner table. For meats, there would be pens of sheep, goats, and poultry within the palace complex or nearby, ensuring a ready supply. Venison and game birds would arrive from imperial hunting grounds. The quality was paramount. Animals were often inspected for health and fatness before being deemed suitable for the emperor's consumption.
Grains, the staples of any diet, were sourced from the most fertile regions. Fine basmati rice from the Himalayan foothills, wheat for the breads from the plains of Punjab, various millets and lentils, all were transported and stored in massive granaries within or near the palace. Sugar in its various forms, from coarse gur, jaggery, to refined white crystals, came from regions like Bengal, renowned for its sugarcane. Even the water wasn't taken for granted. While local river water was available, often water from specific sources considered pure, like the Ganges or certain wells, was preferred for the emperor's personal use and was transported with care. The sourcing wasn't just about raw ingredients. Special types of wood were needed for fuel, each imparting a subtle character to the fire. Particular clays were sourced for making the ideal cooking pots, or the disposable earthenware cups often used for serving drinks or yogurt. Salt came from mines in the Punjab or from coastal salt pans. It was a vast, intricate web of procurement, managed by a host of officials responsible for supply, quality control, and accounting. Every item entering the kitchen stores would be meticulously recorded. Think of the journey of a single peach, perhaps from Persia or Afghanistan. Picked at the perfect moment of near ripeness, carefully wrapped, perhaps in cotton or silk, nestled with others in a padded crate, loaded onto a camel, traveling across mountain passes and desert plains, changing hands, checked by officials until it finally reaches the kitchen, ready to be sliced and served, or transformed into a fragrant preserve or a delicate component of a dessert. The sheer effort condensed into that one piece of fruit is a testament to the power and reach of the Mughal administration and its desire for the finest things in life. This global pantry, as it were, ensured that the chefs in that blazing, chaotic kitchen you just witnessed had the very best to work with, laying the foundation for the extraordinary meals that would soon grace the imperial dastarkhan. So, the imperial pantry is groaning with treasures from across the land and beyond. the finest raw materials an emperor's ransom can buy. But these ingredients, however perfect, are still just potential. The true magic, the transformation into the legendary dishes that would define Mughal cuisine, happens when they meet the alchemical genius of the spice blenders. If the ingredients are the notes, then the spice blends, the masalas, are the complex, soul-stirring melodies that turn a simple meal into an experience. You're about to witness a craft honed over generations, a cornerstone of what made dinner in this palace an event of almost mythical proportions. Imagine stepping away from the raw chill of the ice stores or the earthy scent of root vegetables into a dedicated section of the kitchen complex, or perhaps a specialized spice room. The air here is different again. It's warm, yes, but also dry, and it hums with an almost electric charge of concentrated aroma. This is where the true spice alchemy happens. It's not just add a pinch of this, a dash of that. It's more like conducting a tiny fragrant orchestra, where every speck of dust plays a crucial note. The fragrance alone could probably revive a fainting goat, or at least make it very, very hungry. You see them, the spice masters, often older men or women whose hands move with a practiced, almost reverent grace. They might not have the flamboyant energy of the cooks presiding over giant, bubbling cauldrons, but their focused intensity is just as compelling. Before them are trays of whole spices, the deep brown gloss of cloves, the papery curls of cinnamon bark, the plump green pods of cardamom, the earthy brown of cumin seeds, the almost black spheres of peppercorns, star anise with its licorice perfume, the delicate web of mace, and the hard nuggets of nutmeg. Each one is inspected, chosen for its quality, its fullness of aroma. The first step is often toasting. Spices are gently heated in heavy, dry pans. This isn't about cooking them, but awakening them, coaxing out their volatile oils, deepening their flavors from a gentle whisper to a confident declaration. The sound is a soft rustle and crackle, and the aroma that rises is nutty, smoky, and incredibly complex. One of the most important aspects of Mughal cooking was the careful layering of these aromatic compounds. Then comes the grinding. While some spices might be used whole, many of the signature Mughal flavors come from intricately blended powders. You see massive stone grinding slabs, similar to those used for other ingredients, but perhaps kept exclusively for spices to avoid cross-contamination of flavors. Assistants, often apprentices learning this painstaking art, work rhythmically, crushing and pulverizing the toasted spices. For finer, smaller batches, or for the most precious blends, a master might use a smaller stone mortar and pestle, working with intense concentration. There are no electric grinders here, no shortcuts. It's all about muscle, patience, and an intuitive feel for texture. The goal is a powder that is fine enough to meld seamlessly into a dish, yet perhaps with just enough texture to release its fragrance in stages. And the blends themselves. This is where the real artistry, and sometimes the closely guarded secrets lie. The term garam masala, which many of us know today, refers to a blend of warming, aromatic spices. But in the Mughal kitchen, this wasn't a single standardized recipe. Each master chef, each family, might have their own version, tweaked and perfected over years. Some blends might be designed for robust meat dishes, heavy on black cardamom, cloves, and black pepper. Others, for delicate chicken or fish preparations, might be lighter, fragrant with green cardamom, fennel, and a touch of mace. There were specific masalas for rice dishes like biryani and pulao, different ones for lentil preparations, dals, and even for some desserts and sweet drinks. A mainstream historical fact is that Mughal cuisine is particularly noted for these complex spice mixes, which often aimed for a harmonious balance rather than the fiery heat prioritized in some other Indian culinary traditions.
These aren't just random assortments. The blenders understand the properties of each spice. Some, like black pepper or ginger, are considered hot in the Unani or Ayurvedic medicinal traditions that heavily influenced Mughal culinary philosophy. Others, like fennel or green cardamom, are cooling. A masterful blend achieved not just a delicious taste, but also a balance, a harmony that was believed to be beneficial for digestion and overall well-being. You might see a hakim, a royal physician, consulting with the spice blenders or the head chef, discussing the day's menu and perhaps suggesting adjustments based on the emperor's health or even the season. A quirky tidbit for you. Such was the value and secrecy of some of these signature blends that trying to get a master chef's exact garam masala recipe was probably harder than getting the blueprints for the imperial treasury, and potentially more dangerous if you annoyed the chef. These recipes were often passed down orally from master to apprentice, a form of culinary inheritance. Some chefs might even have had a secret ingredient or a particular method of combining spices that they believed gave their dishes a unique edge. Perhaps a touch of a rare dried flower petal or an unusual tree bark known only to them. Once ground and blended, the masalas are often stored in airtight containers, away from light and heat, to preserve their precious aroma and potency. Freshness is paramount. While some base spices might be prepared in larger quantities, the most nuanced blends were often made daily, or even specifically for a particular set of dishes. The difference between a freshly ground masala and one that has sat for weeks is like the difference between a live concert and a distant, scratchy recording. Historians still argue about the dominant characteristic of Mughal spice use. Was it the sheer number of spices in a single dish, sometimes dozens, creating an almost overwhelming sensory explosion? Or was it the pursuit of an incredibly refined subtlety, where each spice played its part in a perfectly balanced ensemble, enhancing rather than masking the primary ingredient? Perhaps it was both, depending on the dish and the occasion. The Mughals certainly weren't shy about bold flavors, but their cuisine also contains examples of incredible finesse. As you watch these spice artists at work, surrounded by the almost visible clouds of fragrance, sweet, pungent, earthy, floral, all mingling in the air, you realize that this is the invisible heart of the feast to come. This careful, almost meditative process of selecting, toasting, grinding, and blending is what will elevate simple rice to a regal biryani or a piece of lamb into a succulent, aromatic korma. It's a testament to the deep understanding of flavor that characterized Mughal gastronomy, a slow, deliberate magic that prepared the very essence of the dishes that would soon delight the imperial court. The soul of the meal is being born right here, in handfuls of fragrant dust.
That fragrant dust, the very soul of the meal, is now ready to be deployed. But who directs this grand deployment? Who ensures that these meticulously sourced ingredients and alchemically blended spices come together in a symphony of flavors, textures, and aromas that will delight the emperor and his court? You've seen the bustling ranks of cooks, the specialized departments, the almost overwhelming scale of it all. Now it's time to meet the maestro, the powerful figure who stands at the apex of this culinary pyramid, the Mir Bakawal. He's not just a head chef in the modern sense of someone who primarily cooks and creates recipes, though he certainly possesses profound culinary knowledge. The Mir Bakawal is a high-ranking official, a dignitary, the superintendent of the imperial kitchens. He's the culinary equivalent of a 4-star general, except his battles are fought with saffron and cardamom, and his troops are armed with ladles. His realm, the Matbahi Amira, is one of the most critical departments in the palace, for it literally sustains the court and, most importantly, the emperor himself. Keeping this whole operation running smoothly is like trying to conduct a flock of particularly artistic geese while juggling flaming torches. It requires a special kind of genius. You might see him moving through the kitchens, not with the frantic energy of the lower-ranking cooks, but with a measured, authoritative pace. His attire is finer than that of the ordinary kitchen staff, perhaps made of richer fabrics, and he might carry a staff or some other symbol of his office. When he speaks, his voice, though perhaps not loud, carries instant weight. Cooks pause, listen intently, and then scurry to implement his instructions or answer his queries. There's a mixture of respect and perhaps a healthy dose of trepidation in their demeanor. This is the man responsible from the budget, which is enormous, to the final presentation of every dish that leaves the kitchen for the imperial table. One of his most critical responsibilities, as you can imagine, is ensuring the safety and quality of the emperor's food. In an era where political intrigue could often manifest in nefarious ways, the threat of poisoning was ever present. The Mir Bakawal oversees the elaborate security measures surrounding the emperor's meals. This includes supervising the chashnagir, the official taster or team of tasters, who would sample dishes before they were served to the emperor. He probably had the most sophisticated palate in the empire, or the most perpetually nervous stomach, depending on the day. The Mir Bakawal himself might also taste certain dishes, particularly new creations or those specifically requested by the emperor. His seal of approval, sometimes literally a physical seal on a container, was a guarantee of safety and quality. Beyond security, his duties are vast. He manages the procurement of all supplies, ensuring that the global pantry we explored earlier is not just well stocked, but that every item meets the exacting standards of the court. He oversees the hundreds, if not thousands, of kitchen staff, hiring, assigning duties, managing disputes, and ensuring discipline. He's part logistician, part HR manager, part quality control inspector, and part creative director. The Ain-e-Akbari, detailing the administration of Emperor Akbar, gives us a clear indication of the importance and structured nature of this role. The Mir Bakawal was a key figure in the imperial household, wielding considerable influence. Historians still argue about the primary skill set required for a Mir Bakawal. Was it unparalleled culinary artistry, or was it exceptional administrative and managerial prowess? Given the sheer scale of the operation, the latter was undoubtedly crucial. He needed to be able to manage complex supply chains, vast inventories, a large and diverse workforce, and a significant budget. However, a deep understanding of food, ingredients, and cooking techniques was also essential for him to effectively guide his chefs, maintain standards, and innovate when required. Perhaps the most successful Mir Bakawals were those who brilliantly combined both talents. You might observe him inspecting a delivery of fresh game, his keen eyes checking for freshness and quality. Or see him in deep conversation with the spice masters, discussing the precise blend for a new dish being developed for a royal banquet. He might be consulting with the royal physicians, the hakims, to ensure that the menu aligns with the principles of Unani medicine, balancing hot and cold ingredients to promote the emperor's health and well-being. His days are a whirlwind of decision-making, problem-solving, and meticulous oversight. A quirky tidbit: the position of Mir Bakawal could be a route to significant wealth and influence. Beyond his official salary, his control over such a large budget and his proximity to the emperor could attract gifts or favors from suppliers eager for contracts, or from nobles wishing to have their favorite dish subtly promoted, or a new culinary invention brought to the emperor's attention. Some Mir Bakawals became renowned figures in their own right, their names associated with particular culinary innovations or an era of exceptional gastronomic achievement at court. There might even have been a specific ceremonial robe or insignia that only the Mir Bakawal could wear, marking him out in the palace hierarchy, a visual cue of his unique and powerful role. He's also the one who ultimately answers to the emperor if anything goes wrong. If a dish is not up to par, if there's a delay in service, or, heaven forbid, if there's any question about the food's wholesomeness, the Mir Bakawal bears the responsibility. The pressure is immense, but so too is the satisfaction of orchestrating such a magnificent daily performance. He is, in essence, the guardian of the imperial stomach, and, by extension, a guardian of the emperor's health and mood. A well-fed emperor is, one presumes, a more content emperor. As the evening meal approaches its final stages of preparation, the Mir Bakawal's activity might become even more focused. He'll be seen making final checks, ensuring that the dishes are cooked to perfection, that the garnishes are exquisitely applied, and that everything is ready for the complex process of being transported from the kitchens to the dastarkhan, the dining space. His approval is the final gateway through which every morsel must pass. He is the ultimate authority in this realm of fire, spice, and flavor, the conductor bringing all the diverse sections of his culinary orchestra into harmonious accord, preparing for the grand crescendo of the imperial dinner.
The grand crescendo of the imperial dinner, orchestrated by the Mir Bakawal, is indeed approaching. The kitchens are a whirlwind of final preparations, the air thick with the promise of savory delights. But before the first morsel of perfectly spiced biryani or succulent kebab even touches the imperial lips, and indeed throughout the meal, another crucial element demands attention: the beverages. In the often scorching climate of Mughal India, hydration wasn't just a necessity, it was an art form. The array of elixirs and coolers prepared in the palace was as dazzling and thoughtfully crafted as the food itself. Forget your standard table water or mass-produced sugary drinks. We're talking about a vibrant spectrum of sherbets, fragrant infusions, and meticulously treated water, all designed to refresh, delight, and sometimes even to convey status and refined taste. There was likely a dedicated department, the Abdarkhana, responsible for ensuring the emperor and his court had access to pure drinking water and a stunning variety of other beverages. The head of this department, the Abdar, was another important figure, ensuring that every sip was fit for royalty. Let's start with water, the very essence of life. In an era long before microbial science and municipal water treatment plants, ensuring a safe and palatable water supply for the palace was a major undertaking. Getting a clean glass of water wasn't as simple as turning on a tap. It was more like a spa treatment for H2O. Filtered, perfumed, chilled. That water lived a better life than most. River water, often from sacred rivers like the Ganges if logistically feasible, or select well water would be the starting point. It would then undergo various purification processes. Boiling was common, of course. Filtering through layers of cloth, sand, or charcoal was also practiced. Sometimes certain clarifying agents or herbs believed to purify water might be added. The aim was water that was not only safe, but also crystal clear and devoid of any unpleasant taste or odor. Once purified, the water was often cooled. Remember that incredible ice delivery service from the Himalayas we talked about. This was a prime use for it. Chunks of ice would be added to drinks or used to chill containers. Even without ice, ingenious methods were employed. Water stored in porous earthenware pots, known as matkas, would become naturally cool through evaporation. Another technique involved using saltpeter, which, when dissolved in water, creates an endothermic reaction, significantly chilling the container it surrounds. So, even on the hottest day, a cool sip was always within reach of the emperor. Sometimes the drinking water itself would be subtly perfumed with essences like rose or kera, screw pine flower, just a hint to elevate it from the mundane. But why stop at plain, albeit exquisitely purified and cooled, when you can have a sherbet? Mughal sherbets were legendary, a far cry from the luridly colored, artificially flavored concoctions that sometimes bear the name today. These were sophisticated beverages made from fresh fruit juices, flower extracts, and aromatic herbs, sweetened with sugar or honey, and often balanced with a touch of citrus or tamarind for a pleasant tartness. Imagine delicate rose sherbet, the color of a blushed sunset, perfumed with actual rose petals. Or a vibrant ruby-red pomegranate sherbet, bursting with tangy sweetness. Mango, falsa, a type of berry, lemon, orange, watermelon. The bounty of the imperial orchards and gardens found its way into these refreshing drinks. They probably had a sherbet for every conceivable emotion. Feeling a bit melancholic? Here, have the Essence of 1,000 Lost Sunsets sherbet. Just kidding, or am I? The creativity was boundless.
Flower essences were particularly prized. Besides rose, jasmine, bella, Arabian jasmine, and as mentioned, cura were used to create exquisitely fragrant sherbets. These weren't overpowering, perfume-like concoctions, but rather subtly infused drinks where the floral notes provided an ethereal, cooling quality. Some sherbets might also incorporate ingredients like sandalwood, believed to have cooling properties, or even vetiver, kuss, with its earthy, refreshing scent. A quirky tidbit: some of these luxurious drinks were not just about taste and refreshment, but also visual appeal. It's said that certain sherbets were garnished with vark, incredibly thin, edible foils of silver or gold, which would float and shimmer in the cup, adding a touch of otherworldly opulence to an already special drink. Imagine sipping on liquid gold, literally. The preparation of these sherbets was another specialized art within the Abdarkhana. Syrups would be carefully cooked down from fruit juices and sugar, then diluted with chilled water. Essences would be delicately blended. The balance of sweet, tart, and fragrant was crucial. These weren't just thirst quenchers, they were palate cleansers, digestive aids, and expressions of hospitality and refinement. Now, a topic historians still argue about is the consumption of alcoholic beverages. While Islam generally prohibits alcohol, the Mughal court, with its Persian cultural heritage and the personal inclinations of some emperors, Jahangir, for instance, was famously fond of wine and opium, wasn't entirely teetotal. Wine, often imported from Persia or made locally from grapes grown in imperial vineyards, did feature in certain courtly circles and private gatherings. The debate often revolves around how widespread this was, how openly it was practiced, and how it was reconciled with the empire's official Islamic identity. For every account of imperial indulgence, there are also strong affirmations of piety and adherence to religious law. So, while potent grape wines and perhaps other distilled spirits might have been available to some, the everyday publicly offered beverages for most court functions and for the wider household would have been these elaborate non-alcoholic sherbets and treated waters. Besides sherbets, there were other drinks too. Lassi, a yogurt-based drink, either sweetened or salted, was likely common, especially as a cooling digestive. There might have been infusions of various herbs or seeds known for their medicinal properties, subtly incorporated into the beverage offerings. The presentation also mattered. Drinks wouldn't just be sloshed into any old cup. There were elegant vessels of glass, fine ceramic, silver, or even jade, each chosen to complement the drink and the occasion. Special long-spouted ewers, or surahis, were used for pouring. So, as the food is being meticulously arranged, somewhere nearby, the abdars are ensuring that an equally impressive array of liquids is ready. The clinking of ice, the gentle pouring of fragrant liquids, the visual feast of jewel-toned sherbets in ornate cups, it's all part of the sensory prelude to the meal. These elixirs and coolers were more than just beverages. They were an integral part of the Mughal dining experience, reflecting the same attention to detail, pursuit of quality, and appreciation for sensory pleasure that characterized the cuisine. Sometimes, after all those complex, perfumed elixirs, you imagine even an emperor might just crave a simple glass of water, no questions asked, no rose petals involved. But the option for liquid luxury was always there.
With those luxurious elixirs and coolers ready to quench any thirst, the focus now shifts to the stage upon which the culinary drama will unfold. Before a single dish, steaming and fragrant, makes its grand entrance from the kitchens, the dining space itself must be prepared with meticulous care. This isn't a matter of casually setting a table with a few knives and forks. This is the laying of the dastarkwan, an act imbued with tradition, respect, and a profound appreciation for the meal to come. It's the blank canvas awaiting the masterpiece, and its preparation is an art in itself. Imagine a designated hall, or perhaps a grand, airy chamber within the palace, its floors already covered with rich carpets, Persian silks perhaps, or fine wool from Kashmir, their intricate patterns a feast for the eyes even before the food arrives. Attendants, moving with a quiet efficiency that speaks of long practice, enter the room. Their task is to lay the dastarkwan, which literally means tablecloth or dining spread in Persian, the language of the Mughal court. Laying this cloth isn't just chucking a tablecloth on the picnic table. It's more like performing delicate open-heart surgery on the concept of dinner itself. The cloth itself is a statement. For the emperor and high nobility, it would be of the finest quality, perhaps pure white, bleached cotton of an incredible softness and smoothness, or even silk, sometimes subtly embroidered with delicate patterns along its edges. Its size is impressive, a vast expanse designed to accommodate numerous dishes and allow diners to sit comfortably around it on the floor, often propped up by cushions. The whiteness of the cloth, a symbol of purity and cleanliness, is paramount. Keeping that dastarkwan pristine white with all those richly colored, potentially saucy dishes around must have been a full-time job for a whole team of stain anxiety specialists. As a quirky tidbit, to protect the valuable carpets underneath from the inevitable spills of a lavish feast, sometimes a simpler, less ornate cloth, called a safra, would be laid down first, a sort of underblanket for the main event. Watching the attendants spread the dastarkwan is like a quiet, synchronized ballet. They unroll it with precision, ensuring it lies perfectly flat, without creases or wrinkles. There's a hushed reverence to the process. This cloth is not merely functional, it is a sacred space, defining the boundary of the meal, creating an atmosphere of shared experience and abundance. The very act of spreading it signals the transition from everyday routine to the special occasion of the meal, whether it's the emperor's daily dinner or a grander banquet. Once the main cloth is in place, other items begin to appear, each placed with careful consideration. Small individual napkins, often square pieces of fine cloth called chowgoshis, might be neatly arranged for each anticipated diner. Salt, considered a symbol of hospitality and loyalty, is often one of the first condiments placed on the dastarkwan, usually in elegant cellars of silver, jade, or fine ceramic. Sometimes small bowls of other palate cleansers or simple appetizers might be set out, perhaps some fresh herbs, slices of ginger, or wedges of lime. The question of individual plates and utensils is one that historians still argue about.
while European travelers sometimes noted the use of fingers for eating, which was and still is a common and perfectly refined practice in many cultures. The extent to which individual plates or specific utensils were distributed across all diners at a Mughal dastarkhan is a subject of ongoing discussion. For the most part, Mughal dining was a communal affair, with food served on large platters and in bowls from which diners would help themselves. However, for certain dishes or for individuals of very high rank, there might have been personal plates of porcelain, often imported from China and highly prized, silver, or even gold. Spoons made of precious metals or fine wood might be provided for liquid dishes, and knives for carving larger joints of meat, though much of the food would arrive already cut into manageable portions.
As these preliminary items are arranged, the dastarkhan begins to transform from a simple white expanse into a landscape of potential. The empty dastarkhan is like the blank page of a poet or the empty stage before a rock concert. Pure, shimmering potential for deliciousness. There's a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. The attendants work with practiced hands, their movements economical and graceful. You might notice the subtle details, the precise alignment of the salt cellars, the symmetrical folding of the napkins, the way the light from the oil lamps or torches catches the gleam of a silver vessel. In some instances, particularly for very special occasions, the dastarkhan itself might be further adorned. Perhaps fragrant flower petals, rose, jasmine, or marigold would be delicately scattered around its edges, not to be eaten, but to add to the sensory pleasure of the dining experience, their perfume mingling with the aromas of the food that is yet to arrive. This practice underscores the Mughal love for beauty in all its forms, extending even to the temporary canvas of the meal. The placement of everything is deliberate, reflecting an established etiquette and a concern for both aesthetics and practicality. There would be clear pathways for servers to approach and place the dishes without disturbing the diners. The most important dishes, or those intended for the highest-ranking individuals, would be positioned strategically. Even the way the dastarkhan is oriented within the room might have significance. This careful preparation sets the tone for the entire meal. It communicates respect for the food, for the guests, and for the act of dining itself. It's a world away from a rushed, informal meal. Here, every detail is considered. Every element contributes to the overall experience of civility, abundance, and shared pleasure. The dastarkhan is more than just a surface. It's a symbol of community, a space where people come together, not just to eat, but to connect, to converse, and to partake in the bounty of the empire. And now, with this pristine, expectant canvas laid out, the stage is finally set. The air hums with the silent promise of the culinary treasures that are, at this very moment, beginning their journey from the heart of those blazing kitchens.
The dastarkhan lies ready, a vast, expectant canvas. And now, the culinary treasures you've seen being prepared, those meticulously sourced ingredients transformed by spice alchemy and the tireless efforts of the kitchen staff, begin their procession. But amidst the abundance destined for the wider court, there's a current of heightened tension and even greater exclusivity. Our focus narrows to the pinnacle of this entire operation, the emperor's personal meal. This isn't just dinner, it's a carefully orchestrated ritual, a demonstration of power, and a matter of utmost state security. The dishes intended for the emperor, known as khasa or khasai padshahi, are prepared with an almost fanatical degree of care. While the general imperial kitchens are already paragons of cleanliness and order, amidst their controlled chaos, of course, the section dedicated to the emperor's food, or the specific cooks entrusted with it, operate under even stricter protocols. These might be the most trusted chefs in the Mir Bakawal's brigade, individuals whose loyalty and skill are beyond question. Sometimes a separate, smaller kitchen within the palace complex might be reserved solely for this purpose. As these special dishes are finalized, they are often placed in vessels of gold, silver, jade, or the finest imported porcelain. Each dish might be covered with an ornate lid. And here's where the security really ramps up. It was common practice for these lids to be sealed, sometimes with a band of cloth impressed with the Mir Bakawal's personal seal or that of another high-ranking official. This ensured that from the moment it left the trusted cook's hand to the moment it was presented before the emperor, no unauthorized interference could occur. Trying to find out what the emperor was having for dinner before it was announced was probably like trying to get early spoilers for the season finale of the universe. Top secret stuff. The journey from the kitchen to the emperor's dining quarters, whether a private chamber or a more formal setting, is not a casual affair. These dishes are often escorted by a retinue of guards and trusted servants. Imagine a small, very important convoy navigating the palace corridors, its precious cargo protected at every step. The tension is palpable. Everyone involved understands the gravity of their role. And then the crucial moment, the tasting. Before the emperor takes a single bite, the food must undergo a final critical inspection. This is where the chashnagir, the official food taster, steps into the spotlight. Being an imperial food taster, great for a free meal, terrible for your life insurance premiums. Today's special, delicious korma with a 50-50 chance of continued existence. It sounds like a joke, but the threat of poisoning was a genuine concern for rulers throughout history, and the Mughals were no exception. The chashnagir, often a person of trust and, one assumes, a robust constitution, would sample a small portion of each dish intended for the emperor. This wasn't a quick, furtive nibble. It was a formal process. The Mir Bakawal would likely be present, along with perhaps a royal physician or hakim. They would observe the taster carefully. Only after a suitable interval, ensuring no ill effects manifested, would the dish be deemed safe for imperial consumption. Sometimes multiple officials or even the cooks themselves might taste the food at various stages. Historians still argue whether these elaborate food security measures were primarily driven by genuine constant threats of assassination attempts, or if they increasingly became ritualized performances designed to emphasize the emperor's supreme value and the meticulous care taken for his safety. It was most likely a blend of both pragmatic caution and symbolic theater.
Once cleared, the emperor's specific selection of dishes is arranged before him. It wouldn't be the entire Dasturkhan's worth, but a curated array of his preferred or specially requested items. The presentation is, of course, exquisite. Each bowl and platter is a work of art, the food within arranged with an eye for color, texture, and aroma. Perhaps a particular silver ewer holds his specially treated drinking water, or a golden goblet his favorite sherbet. A quirky tidbit. Some Mughal emperors were known to have very specific preferences. For example, it's often mentioned that Emperor Aurangzeb, known for his piety and simpler tastes later in his reign, favored vegetarian dishes or those cooked with minimal ostentation. Contrastly, his great-grandfather Akbar, despite his own periods of vegetarianism, was also known for his culinary curiosity. And Jahangir's memoirs often detail his particular fondness for certain fruits or game, prepared exactly to his liking. Imagine the pressure in the kitchens if the emperor suddenly craved, say, a very specific type of Kashmiri apple out of season, or a rare bird cooked with spices from a distant land. If the emperor didn't like a dish, you didn't just get a bad Yelp review. You might get a one-way ticket to less prestigious career opportunities, possibly in a very remote location. The actual dishes served to the emperor would represent the pinnacle of Mughal culinary art. Perhaps a delicate pulao made with the finest basmati rice, fragrant with saffron and rosewater, studded with tender morsels of lamb or chicken.
There might be a rich korma, its gravy velvety and complex, or a selection of kebabs grilled to perfection. Breads would be fresh from the tandoor, soft naans, flaky parathas, or perhaps a sweet saffron-infused shirmal. There would also be vegetable preparations cooked with subtle spices to retain their natural flavors, and various pickles and chutneys, achars and chutneys to provide contrasting notes. The diversity of the emperor's plate would also reflect his personal tastes and the advice of his hakims. The concept of balancing hot and cold foods according to Unani medical principles was often applied to the emperor's diet to ensure his health and vigor. So, a rich, heating meat dish might be accompanied by a cooling yogurt-based side dish or a refreshing sherbet. While the Dastar Khan often implies communal eating, the emperor's immediate service was highly individualized. He would be attended by his closest servants. The portions served to him would be manageable, the presentation impeccable. The atmosphere around him, even if he were dining with guests, would be one of focused respect. All eyes, in a sense, were on the emperor's plate, not just for its contents, but for the subtle cues of his enjoyment or displeasure. His preferences could set culinary trends throughout the court, and even influence the broader cuisine of the empire. The guarded flavors on his plate were, in essence, the most important flavors in the land.
Those guarded, exquisite flavors on the emperor's plate are indeed the most important in the land, setting the standard for an empire. But rarely would the emperor dine entirely alone, especially during more formal evening meals. His company, however, was not a casual gathering of friends. To be invited to share the Dastar Khan with the Padshah was a mark of immense privilege, a clear indicator of one's standing in the intricate hierarchy of the Mughal court. And as you observe this rarefied assembly, you quickly realize that the etiquette is as complex and carefully managed as the preparation of the food itself. You thought your grandma's rules about no elbows on the table were tough? This is like the Olympics of polite eating, and a misjudged finger bowl incident could cost you your provincial governorship. The guests, if any are present for this particular meal, would be a select group. Perhaps the emperor's sons, a few trusted high-ranking nobles, the amirs and khans who governed provinces or led armies, a visiting dignitary whose importance warranted such an honor, or a particularly favored scholar or poet. Getting a good seat at this dinner wasn't about arriving early. It was about your current ranking on the emperor's favorometer. Too far down the Dastar Khan, and you'd practically need binoculars to see the main course. Seating arrangements were no trivial matter. They were a public declaration of rank and imperial favor, meticulously planned, perhaps by an official like the Mir-i-Majlis, the master of ceremonies. Proximity to the emperor was the ultimate status symbol. As the chosen few take their places on the plush cushions arranged around the Dastar Khan, a hush falls over the room. The attire of the guests is naturally splendid. Fine silks, brocades, jewels glinting in the soft light of the oil lamps or candles. Yet, despite the opulence, there's an air of profound deference. All eyes are subtly on the emperor, awaiting his lead. The Mughal courtly code of conduct, known as adab, governed every gesture, every word. Conversation, if it occurs, is usually initiated by the emperor. Making casual chit-chat was probably a high-stakes gamble. Lovely weather we're having, your omnipotent majesty? Or is my inquiry about meteorological conditions a grievous offense punishable by less dessert? Guests speak in low, respectful tones, and only when addressed or when it's clear that speaking is appropriate. There are rules about how to address the emperor, the titles to use, the degree of humility to display in one's posture and speech. Laughter, if it happens, is usually a polite echo of the emperor's own amusement. The act of eating itself is a performance of refined manners.
Food is taken with the right hand, typically using the thumb and first 2 or 3 fingers. Portions are small. Eating too greedily or making undue noise would be a grave breach of decorum. There's an unwritten rule about not reaching across another diner or across the dastarkhan for a dish. Instead, one would wait for it to be offered or discreetly signal an attendant. Even the way one looks at the food or at the emperor is prescribed. A quirky tidbit: it was considered highly improper to stare directly at the emperor while he was eating or to appear to be scrutinizing his choices. One maintained a respectful, slightly averted gaze unless directly engaged by him. Similarly, it was polite to pace oneself with the emperor. Finishing too quickly or lagging too far behind could be seen as disrespectful. Before the meal begins and after it concludes, a vital ritual is the washing of hands. Attendants move gracefully, bringing forth elegant ewers, often intricately crafted from silver or another precious metal, called aftabas, and matching basins or chilam cheese. Perfumed water, perhaps infused with rose or jasmine, is poured over the hands of each diner, who then dries them on fine linen towels. This isn't just about hygiene. It's a ceremonial cleansing, preparing one for the sanctity of the meal and purifying once afterward. It's another layer in the sophisticated tapestry of Mughal dining.
Historians still argue about the primary atmosphere these elaborate dining rituals created. Were they predominantly stiff, formal affairs designed solely to reinforce the emperor's awe-inspiring power and the rigid hierarchy of the court? Or did they also serve in a more subtle way to cultivate a shared elite culture, a sense of camaraderie and loyalty among the diverse nobles who formed the backbone of the empire? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. While the formality was undeniable and served to underscore imperial authority, the shared experience of partaking in such exquisite food in such a refined setting could also foster a sense of belonging to an exclusive and privileged world. You notice the attendants moving like shadows. They anticipate needs before they are voiced, replenishing water or sherbet, quietly removing empty dishes, and presenting new ones from the seemingly endless stream arriving from the kitchens. Their movements are practiced, unobtrusive, ensuring the smooth flow of the meal without disrupting the diners. They are the invisible machinery that keeps this elegant performance running. The types of dishes served might also vary slightly depending on the company. While the emperor always received his khasa dishes, the general spread for guests would also be lavish, showcasing the breadth and depth of imperial cuisine. Sharing food from the same dastarkhan, even with the inherent hierarchy, created a bond. The emperor, by inviting guests to his table, was extending a significant honor, a gesture of inclusion into his inner circle, however temporary. The privileged guests around the dastarkhan are acutely aware of the honor and the scrutiny. Every action is measured. They are not just there to eat, they are participants in a ritual that reaffirms the social and political order of the Mughal world. The meal is a stage, and they are actors playing their designated roles, with the emperor as the undisputed lead. The slightest misstep in etiquette could have social, if not political, repercussions. It's a world where a dropped piece of naan could, metaphorically speaking, echo louder than a cannon shot. Yet within this framework of strict decorum, there is also the undeniable pleasure of partaking in some of the most sophisticated and delicious food imaginable in an atmosphere of unparalleled luxury.
That unparalleled luxury you've just witnessed, the meticulous etiquette, the favored guests basking in the glow of imperial presence, it's a vivid snapshot of one facet of palace dining. But there's another world within these imposing walls, equally opulent, equally concerned with the pleasures of the palate, yet shrouded in a veil of seclusion. The zanana, the imperial women's quarters. Here, queens, princesses, the emperor's mother, and a host of other noble ladies and their attendants experienced their own elaborate dining rituals, a parallel culinary universe operating under its own refined customs. To step into the zenana is to enter a realm of heightened sensory experience, though of a different kind than the formal male-dominated court. The air might be thick with the fragrance of expensive perfumes like attar of roses or jasmine, mingling with the subtle aroma of incense and, of course, the enticing smells of exquisite food being prepared or served. Instead of the hushed, deferential tones of the emperor's dastarkwan, here you might hear the gentle murmur of women's voices, laughter, the strains of music from a private performance, or the recitation of poetry. Don't let the secluded walls fool you. The ladies of the zenana weren't just passively waiting for dinner. They were often running empires from their drawing rooms, probably while critiquing the chef's use of rosewater. The zenana, or mahal, wasn't a gilded cage in the simplistic sense, though it was certainly a protected and restricted space. It was a vast, complex establishment, a mini-city within the palace, with its own hierarchy, administration, gardens, and, crucially, its own arrangements for food. The most senior women, the emperor's mother, often a figure of immense power and influence, his principal wives and his sisters lived in lavish apartments and commanded considerable resources. Their meals would have been no less splendid than those served in the main court. Food would arrive from the central imperial kitchens, prepared with the same high-quality ingredients and culinary skill, or sometimes from dedicated kitchens attached to the zenana itself, catering specifically to the tastes and dietary requirements of its inhabitants. Imagine the scene. In a beautifully decorated chamber, adorned with rich carpets, silk hangings, and plush cushions, a dastarkwan is laid, perhaps of equally fine linen or silk, though the ambiance might be somewhat more relaxed than in the emperor's formal dining hall. The dishes served here would rival any imperial spread. You'd find an array of aromatic pulaus and biryanis, tender kormas and kalias, delicate kebabs, a vibrant selection of vegetable dishes, freshly baked breads, and, of course, those delightful sherbets and coolers. However, the preferences within the zenana might have leaned towards certain types of dishes. Perhaps there was a greater fondness for more subtly spiced foods, or a particular appreciation for elaborate desserts, sweetmeats, mitai, and fruit preserves. The presentation would be just as artful, with food served in beautiful vessels of porcelain, silver, or jade. Historians still debate the precise degree of influence these powerful women had on the broader culinary trends of the court from within their secluded sphere. Did their specific requests for certain dishes or ingredients ripple outwards, shaping the repertoire of the imperial chefs, or were their preferences largely a subset of the established courtly cuisine?
The company at a zenana meal would naturally be exclusively female, or include very young male relatives. This created a different social dynamic. While hierarchy undoubtedly existed within the zenana too, the dowager queen holding precedence, followed by the emperor's current wives in order of rank or favor, then princesses, and so on, the atmosphere might allow for more open conversation, storytelling, and shared feminine camaraderie than would be possible in the more public mixed-gender court settings, which were rare for dining. Imagine the dinner conversations, probably a mix of high politics. Many Mughal women were astute political players and managed their own estates or trade ventures. Poetry recitations, education for high-born women was common. Discussions of fashion and jewelry, and whose biryani recipe was really the best in the palace. The original Real Housewives of the Mughal Empire, but with way better food. A quirky tidbit. Some accounts suggest that certain ladies of the zenana were not just consumers of fine food, but also active participants in its creation. They might have had their own small private kitchens where they experimented with recipes, particularly for complex sweets, pickles, or perfumed syrups. These family recipes, passed down through generations of women, could be highly prized.
Furthermore, the ritual of preparing and enjoying pan, betel leaf quid, after a meal was particularly elaborate in the Zenana. The pandans, ornate boxes holding the various ingredients for pan, betel leaves, erica nuts, lime paste, cardamom, cloves, and sometimes tobacco or sweet flavorings, were often beautiful objects d'art, and the skill of folding a perfect pan was considered an accomplishment. Just as with the emperor's food, security would have been a concern, though perhaps managed differently. Trusted female attendants would oversee the serving of food, and it's plausible that the senior ladies had their own equivalent of food tasters from among their loyal staff. What happened in the Zenana stayed in the Zenana, especially if it involved who got the last piece of that divine almond halwa. Some secrets are worth guarding with your life, or at least your dessert spoon. The meals in the Zenana were not just about sustenance, they were social events, opportunities for entertainment, and affirmations of status and culture within their own sphere. Musicians, dancers, female of course, and storytellers might entertain the diners. The setting would be one of refined comfort, designed to appeal to all senses. Richly embroidered cushions, the soft glow of lamps, the scent of flowers and perfumes, the taste of exquisite food. It was a world designed for pleasure and sophisticated living, albeit within defined boundaries. These Zenana feasts, though hidden from the public eye, were an integral part of the palace's gastronomic life. They ensured that the women of the imperial family, who played crucial, if often unseen roles in the dynasty's fortunes, also partook in the empire's bounty in a manner befitting their rank. The culinary traditions nurtured here, the preferences expressed, and perhaps even the recipes developed, all contributed to the rich tapestry of Mughal culture. It's a reminder that history, and indeed the history of food, unfolds not just in the grand public arenas, but also in the quiet, secluded spaces where lives are lived with equal complexity and richness.
The quiet, secluded spaces of the Zenana, much like the emperor's more public dining hall, have witnessed their share of culinary richness, meals that speak of power, pleasure, and intricate social webs. But what happens when the last morsel has been savored, the final sip of sherbet taken, and the dastarhwan, that once pristine canvas, now bears the colorful aftermath of a grand feast? In a household of such staggering scale and opulence, the sheer volume of food prepared and served daily meant that leftovers weren't just a few bits and pieces in the back of the fridge. They were a significant quantity of high-quality cuisine, and dealing with this surplus was surprisingly a rather organized affair. It's easy to imagine that in such a lavish environment, waste would be rampant. And while some spoilage was inevitable in a pre-refrigeration era, the Mughal palace, like many large, well-managed households of its time, had systems in place to ensure that edible food didn't simply go to ruin. This wasn't just about frugality, though that could play a part, but also about a hierarchical distribution of bounty, a way of extending the emperor's largesse further down the social ladder. Let's be honest, the scraps from a Mughal emperor's table were probably better than a Michelin star meal for most of us. Oh, just some leftover peacock biryani and gold leaf garnished swan. I suppose the dogs can have it. Well, maybe not quite like that, but you get the idea. Once the emperor and his immediate guests, or the ladies of the Zenana and their companions, had finished their meal, attendants would clear the dastarhwan. The remaining dishes, still laden with perfectly good food, half-eaten platters of pulao, untouched kebabs, portions of rich kormas, bowls of fragrant vegetables, and various breads, would be carefully collected. This wasn't a haphazard scraping into a communal bin. There was a protocol. A significant historical fact to consider is the concept of jutha in Indian culture, which pertains to food that has been partly eaten or touched by someone, particularly a superior. Far from being considered contaminated in a negative way, the jutha of a highly respected or powerful individual like the emperor could be seen as blessed, carrying some of their spiritual essence or favor. Therefore, remnants from the emperor's personal plates, or even dishes he had merely gestured towards, were often highly sought after. These prized leftovers might be distributed among his most favored courtiers or personal attendants as a mark of special grace. To receive such a morsel was an honor, a tangible connection to the imperial presence. Beyond these almost sacred remnants, the bulk of the leftover food embarked on a journey down the palace hierarchy. There was probably a pecking order for leftovers that was as complicated as the seating chart for the main meal. High-ranking officials and their households, who might not have dined directly with the emperor but were still part of the inner circle, could receive substantial portions of near-untouched dishes. Next in line would be the lesser officials, the clerks, the scribes, and the vast array of palace servants. Guards stationed at various posts, the stable hands, the groundskeepers, the kitchen staff themselves who had toiled to prepare the feast, all would benefit from this redistribution. The sheer logistics of this are fascinating. Imagine trays laden with food being systematically carried from the elite dining areas to other parts of the palace complex. It would require coordination and a clear understanding of who was entitled to what. Perhaps different departments had specific times or locations for receiving their share. This system not only prevented waste, but also served as a form of payment or perk for the lower-ranking staff, supplementing their regular wages and fostering loyalty. After all, a well-fed attendant is generally a happier and more diligent attendant.
Even the imperial animals weren't left out. The royal stables housed prized horses and, of course, the magnificent elephants that were symbols of Mughal power. These animals, particularly the elephants, had voracious appetites. Specific types of leftovers, perhaps certain grains, breads, or vegetable matter, would be directed towards them. The royal elephants probably ate better than minor nobility in some other countries. Another helping of that leftover rose-petal-infused rice pudding, Jeeves. Don't mind if I do. There might also have been a royal menagerie with various exotic birds and beasts, and they too would have their share of the palace's culinary surplus. Even the dogs and cats that inevitably roamed the vast palace grounds would find sustenance. A quirky tidbit that one might imagine is the creative upcycling of certain leftovers. For instance, day-old bread, if not suitable for the higher echelons, might be transformed by lower-ranking kitchen staff into other dishes, perhaps a type of bread pudding, or used to thicken stews, ensuring nothing perfectly edible was discarded. Or specific parts of a dish, like rich gravies, could be separated and sent to one group, while the meat portions went to another, maximizing the distribution. Historians still argue about the broader socio-economic impact of this redistribution. Was it a genuinely effective form of social welfare that significantly alleviated hunger within the palace walls, and perhaps even for the urban poor if any surplus reached beyond the gates? Or was it more of a symbolic gesture, a trickle-down effect of conspicuous consumption that primarily served to maintain the loyalty and well-being of the immediate imperial dependents? The scale was undoubtedly large, but relative to the entire population of a city like Delhi or Agra, its direct impact on general poverty might have been limited, though certainly life-sustaining for those within its reach. Charitable distribution to the poor outside the palace was also a known practice for many Islamic rulers, and the Mughals were no exception in their patronage of Sufi shrines, madrasas, and public kitchens, langars that fed the needy. While the direct day-to-day leftovers might primarily serve the palace ecosystem, on special occasions, festivals, or as acts of piety, larger quantities of food were often distributed to the general populace. So, as the lights dim further and the palace settles after the grand meal, the life of the food doesn't just end. It continues, flowing outwards and downwards, sustaining a complex web of people and animals. The beneath-the-table world of surplus and scraps reveals a pragmatic and surprisingly structured aspect of Mughal palace life, a necessary corollary to the dazzling opulence of the imperial Dasturkhan. It shows a system where bounty, even in its secondary form, was still a tool of patronage, a means of sustenance, and a reflection of the intricate social order that defined this remarkable era.
That intricate social order, with its carefully managed distribution of surplus, speaks volumes about the everyday workings of the Mughal palace. But what happened when every day was suspended? When a truly momentous occasion called for a display of imperial magnificence that would echo through the empire and beyond? Then, my friend, you entered the realm of the grand banquet, a festive splendor that took the already impressive culinary standards of the palace and amplified them to a level that could only be described as breathtaking. A dazzling spectacle of power, wealth, and unparalleled culinary artistry. If the daily imperial dinner was a beautifully composed symphony, then a state banquet was an opera of Wagnerian proportions, louder, longer, and with a cast of thousands. These were not impulsive affairs. They marked significant events: the anniversary of the emperor's coronation, a royal wedding, which could involve days, even weeks of feasting, the birth of a prince, major religious festivals like Eid, or the reception of an important ambassador or a subservient ruler paying homage. The menu for one of these banquets probably looked less like a list and more like an epic novel. Chapter 1, The 50 Variations of Lamb. Chapter 2, 1,000 Ways with Rice. We'll skip ahead to the dessert section, which is Volume 7. Imagine a vast courtyard, perhaps the Diwan-i-Am, Hall of Public Audience itself, or a specially constructed series of enormous, richly decorated tents, transformed into an al fresco dining paradise. Torches and countless oil lamps would illuminate the scene, their light glinting off the gold and silver threads in the tapestries, the jewels of the assembled guests, and the polished surfaces of thousands of serving dishes. The air wouldn't just carry the scent of food, but also the perfume of roses and jasmine from garlands and fountains, and the heady aroma of expensive incense burning in ornate censers. You wouldn't just pop over for a Mughal state banquet. You'd probably need to start preparing a week in advance, mostly by fasting, just to make room for the appetizers. The number of guests could run into the thousands, a glittering assembly of the empire's elite, nobles, military commanders, high-ranking officials, religious scholars, poets, artists, and visiting dignitaries, all dressed in their most splendid attire. The dastarkhan laid for such an event would be a colossal affair, or more likely, multiple dastarkhans stretching out in long lines, each groaning under the weight of an almost unimaginable profusion of food. Historical chronicles, like the Ain-i-Akbari from Akbar's time and accounts from later reigns, speak of hundreds, even thousands of different dishes being prepared. Now, historians still argue about the literal accuracy of these staggering numbers. Were they precise counts, or a form of courtly hyperbole designed to emphasize the emperor's boundless generosity and resources? Either way, the sheer variety and quantity were undeniably immense. The Mir Bakawal and his entire kitchen staff would have been working at an almost superhuman pace for days, if not weeks, in preparation. The sourcing of ingredients would have reached a fever pitch, with special couriers bringing in the rarest delicacies from every corner of the empire. The fires in the kitchens would blaze non-stop. Specialized teams would focus on crafting spectacular centerpiece dishes, designed as much for visual awe as for taste. A quirky tidbit often mentioned in tales of grand feasts, though its exact Mughal parallel needs careful historical sifting, is the idea of incredibly elaborate, almost architectural food presentations. Imagine whole roasted lambs or goats stuffed with intricate layers of other meats and rice,
or rice pulaus sculpted into the shapes of miniature forts or gardens, adorned with edible silver and gold leaf. Some accounts even hint at sweets and savories constructed to resemble chessboards or fruit carved into fantastic birds and flowers.
The service itself would be a marvel of organization. An army of attendants would move with choreographed precision, bringing forth wave after wave of dishes. There would be countless varieties of rice, fragrant biryanis, rich pulaus, simple steamed rice to accompany the saucier dishes. Meats in every conceivable form, roasted, grilled, stewed in rich kormas and kaliyas, minced for delicate kebabs. Poultry like chicken, duck, and game birds, such as partridge and quail, cooked in dozens of styles. Fish from the rivers and coasts. An endless array of vegetable preparations, showcasing both local and exotic produce. Breads of all shapes and sizes, from fluffy naans and sheermals to crisp rotis. And, of course, an ocean of colorful, fragrant sherbets served in gleaming vessels, alongside an abundance of fresh and dried fruits, nuts, and a galaxy of sweetmeats. Halwas, barfis, jalebis, and more. But a Mughal grand banquet wasn't just about the food. It was a multi-sensory experience. Musicians would play classical Indian and Persian melodies, their tunes floating through the air, sometimes soothing, sometimes invigorating. Dancers might perform, their movements graceful and captivating. Poets might recite verses composed especially for the occasion, praising the emperor and the glory of the empire. It was a feast for the ears and eyes as much for the palate. These events were also deeply political. The opulence was a clear statement of imperial power and stability, designed to awe and impress both internal nobles and external rivals or allies. The act of sharing such a magnificent feast fostered a sense of collective identity among the diverse elites of the empire, binding them closer to the throne. Gifts were often exchanged. The emperor might bestow robes of honor, heelot, jewels, or other valuable presents upon favored guests, further cementing loyalty. Historians often debate the primary motivation. Was it pure, unadulterated celebration and hospitality, or was it a meticulously calculated piece of political theater? Likely it was a potent blend of both, where genuine festivity served profound state interests. The sheer scale of these banquets meant that the system for dealing with leftovers, which we discussed earlier, would be operating on an epic level. The leftovers from one of these feasts could probably feed a small, very grateful European principality for a month. More saffron-infused pheasant, anyone? No? Right then, send it to the Duke of Earl. He looks a bit peckish. The distribution would extend far and wide, a cascade of culinary bounty, reinforcing the image of the emperor as a generous provider for his people, at least those within the immediate orbit of the palace. To witness such a grand banquet would be to see the Mughal Empire at its most spectacular, a moment where all its resources, its artistic talents, and its organizational prowess were marshaled to create an unforgettable display of imperial splendor. It was a world away from a quiet family dinner, a fleeting glimpse into a realm where extravagance was the norm, and where a meal could be a major instrument of statecraft, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind about the majesty and might of the Padshah.
That undeniable majesty and might of the Padshah, so spectacularly displayed in those grand banquets, was, of course, dependent on one crucial factor: the emperor's own health and well-being. And while the imperial kitchens could produce dishes of unimaginable richness and flavor, there was another, often quieter, influence at play in shaping the royal diet, that of the hakim, the royal physician. In the Mughal court, as in many sophisticated cultures of the era, food wasn't just for pleasure or sustenance, it was also considered a primary form of medicine. Wellness was, quite literally, woven into the very fabric of the imperial menu.
So, while the emperor might be craving a third helping of that incredibly rich peacock korma we imagined, the hakim is probably standing by like, "Ahem, your majesty, perhaps a delicate sliver of cucumber instead, for your hums, yes, the hums." It was a delicate dance between indulgence and health, between the desires of the imperial palate and the dictates of traditional medical wisdom, primarily Unani tib, a sophisticated system of Greco-Arabic medicine that had been refined over centuries. Ayurvedic principles, indigenous to India, also played a role, sharing similar concepts about the inherent properties of foodstuffs and their impact on the body. The core idea, in greatly simplified terms, was balance. Unani medicine, for instance, believed that the human body contained 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, each associated with qualities of hot, cold, moist, and dry. Health was maintained when these humors were in equilibrium, and illness arose from an imbalance. Foods, too, were categorized according to these same properties. Some were considered heating, like ginger, garlic, or rich meats. Others cooling, like yogurt, cucumber, or melons. Some were moistening, others drying. The hakim's role, therefore, was to advise the emperor, and by extension the mir bakawal and the kitchen staff, on a diet that would maintain this crucial humoral balance, or correct any existing imbalances. Trying to remember all the hot and cold food combinations must have been like studying for a particularly spicy final exam. Does saffron go with Tuesday, or will it cause an imbalance in my royal spleen? This didn't necessarily mean the food became bland or boring, far from it. The genius of the Mughal chefs, guided by the hakims, lay in their ability to create dishes that were both delicious and aligned with these medical principles. Spices themselves were often chosen not just for flavor, but also for their medicinal properties. Ginger, for example, was warming and considered good for digestion. Cardamom could be cooling. Turmeric was prized for its anti-inflammatory and purifying qualities. The art was in the blending, achieving a harmonious taste profile that also served a therapeutic purpose. It was the ultimate balancing act, making food that tasted like heaven but wouldn't send your imperial digestive system to, well, the other place. The original functional foods, but with more bling. The hakims were highly educated individuals, often learned in philosophy, astronomy, and pharmacology in addition to medicine. Their advice would be taken very seriously. They might inspect ingredients, consult with the mir bakawal on the day's menu, and even prepare specific medicinal concoctions or specially infused waters for the emperor. Their influence extended beyond just food. They advised on all aspects of the emperor's lifestyle, from exercise and sleep to bathing and perfumes, all aimed at maintaining that vital equilibrium.
A quirky tidbit often found in historical accounts relates to specific dietary prescriptions for enhancing certain qualities or treating particular ailments. For instance, almonds were widely believed to be good for memory and brain power. Certain fruits or herbs might be recommended to boost vitality or ensure a good night's sleep. Conversely, some food combinations might be strictly forbidden, believed to cause indigestion or more serious humoral disturbances. One can only imagine an emperor renowned for his power having to sheepishly follow his hakim's orders to avoid his favorite but currently unsuitable mango pickle. Or perhaps the hakims themselves got creative. There are tales, though often more legendary than historically verifiable, of physicians subtly incorporating beneficial herbs into delicious dishes so the royal patient wouldn't even realize they were taking their medicine. Historians still debate the actual clinical efficacy of some of these dietary interventions by modern scientific standards. While the emphasis on fresh ingredients, balanced meals, and moderation certainly had merit, some of the humoral theories or specific prescriptions might seem more esoteric today. However, the psychological comfort provided by such a system, the sense that one's health was being meticulously managed by learned experts, was undoubtedly significant. Moreover, this system was the product of centuries of observation and empirical knowledge, and many traditional remedies and dietary principles continue to be valued. The debate often centers on whether the primary driver was verifiable medical benefit or the reinforcement of a controlled, ordered lifestyle, befitting a ruler whose well-being was synonymous with the well-being of the state. The Hakim's touch, therefore, added another layer of intention and sophistication to the already complex world of Mughal palace dining. It reminds us that for these powerful rulers, food was intrinsically linked to vitality, longevity, and the ability to govern. The pursuit of exquisite flavor and the pursuit of good health were not seen as mutually exclusive, but as complementary aspects of a refined and well-ordered life. So, as you picture that magnificent dasturkhan, remember that behind the dazzling array of dishes, there was often a subtle guiding hand, ensuring that the feast was not just a delight to the senses, but also a carefully considered offering to the temple of the imperial body.
That carefully considered offering to the temple of the imperial body, guided by the wisdom of Hakims, represents the intricate internal logic of Mughal dining. But what happened when someone from a completely different culinary and cultural universe encountered this sophisticated world? During the 17th century, a steady stream of European traders, ambassadors, physicians, and adventurers made their way to the fabulously wealthy Mughal court. Their letters, journals, and memoirs provide us with fascinating, if sometimes biased and bewildered glimpses into what dinner in a Mughal palace looked like through outsider eyes. During the 17th century, a steady stream of European traders, ambassadors, physicians, and adventurers made their way to the fabulously wealthy Mughal court. Their letters, journals, and memoirs provide us with fascinating, if sometimes biased and bewildered glimpses into what dinner in a Mughal palace looked like through outsider eyes. The manner of eating was another point of frequent comment. Accustomed to an increasing array of cutlery, knives, spoons, and the still somewhat novel fork, many Europeans were intrigued or even taken aback by the refined Indian custom of eating with the right hand. Some European travelers were a bit flummoxed by the whole eating with your fingers thing. But where are the 27 different types of forks for each course? How does one convey status without the correct fork? They'd note the dexterity involved, the cleanliness. Hands were, as we know, meticulously washed before and after meals, but it was different enough to be a significant cultural marker in their accounts. François Bernier, for instance, provided detailed descriptions of how food was handled, often with a sense of detached curiosity. The absence of wine at many official state functions, especially under more orthodox rulers like Aurangzeb, also garnered attention, particularly from envoys whose own cultures often centered diplomatic hospitality around alcoholic beverages. While we know wine wasn't entirely absent from the private lives of some Mughal elites, the public emphasis on sherbets and water would have been noted. Conversely, the offering of pan, betel leaf with arakilat and other ingredients, at the end of a meal was a ubiquitous custom that fascinated and sometimes confused Europeans. They describe the elaborate pandans, the ritual of preparation, and the resulting red-stained lips and teeth of those who partook, occasionally mistaking it for something more alarming until they understood its cultural significance as a digestive, a mouth freshener, and a social grace.
A quirky tidbit often comes from these outsider observations of things taken for granted locally. For example, the sheer silence or the low murmur of conversation at the emperor's dasturkhan, governed by strict etiquette, might have seemed unusual to Europeans accustomed to more boisterous or openly conversational meal sittings amongst their own nobility. or their surprise at the incredible softness and thinness of the breads, so different from the coarser loaves they might have been used to. Of course, these accounts are not without their issues, a point historians constantly grapple with. Were these European observers providing objective, factual reports, or were their descriptions heavily colored by their own cultural preconceptions, their political aims like securing trade deals, or even a desire to entertain their readers back home with tales of the exotic Orient? There's an ongoing scholarly debate about the reliability of these sources, particularly when they interpret motives or the nuances of social interactions. Did they truly understand the complex web of status, obligation, and power play unfolding before them at the Dastarhuan? Or did they often project their own frameworks onto what they saw? For instance, Sir Thomas Roe's journals from Jahangir's court are invaluable, providing rich details about the material culture and some of the customs. However, he was also frequently frustrated by what he perceived as diplomatic slights or the impenetrable nature of courtly intrigue, and his writings reflect these frustrations. He might describe a magnificent feast, but then lament the lack of progress on his treaty negotiations. Bernier, the physician, often adopted a more analytical, almost ethnographic tone, but even his observations were shaped by his European intellectual background and his position as an outsider looking in. Despite these caveats, the glimpses these foreigners provide are precious. They highlight aspects of Mughal dining that contemporary Indian chroniclers might have taken for granted, and therefore not recorded in such detail. They offer a comparative perspective, allowing us to see what was truly unique or particularly striking about the Mughal table. They noticed the incredible efficiency of the service, the quality of the ingredients, the sheer scale of the imperial household's consumption, and the profound respect shown for food and the rituals surrounding it. These outsider views paint a picture of a culinary world that was deeply sophisticated, immensely wealthy, and governed by its own elaborate set of rules and aesthetics. A world that could inspire awe, admiration, and occasionally complete bewilderment in those who came from afar. It's through their eyes that we get a sense of just how dazzlingly different and impressively self-contained the universe of a 17th century Mughal palace dinner truly was.
That dazzling, multifaceted universe of a 17th century Mughal palace dinner, whether viewed through the curious eyes of a foreigner or understood from within its intricate cultural framework, was truly something to behold. And as the main courses, with their savory spices and rich gravies, are gradually cleared away by the ever-watchful attendants, a gentle shift occurs in the atmosphere. The intensity of the feast begins to soften, replaced by a sweet anticipation. For now, as the grand meal draws to its graceful close, comes the final flourish, the sweet retreat, the presentation of desserts. And with them, a sense of calm begins to settle over the palace, like a soft, velvet cloak. Just when you thought you couldn't possibly eat another bite after that mountain of biryani and those endless platters of kebabs, they'd roll out the dessert dastarkhan, or at least a significant portion of it would be dedicated to these sweet marvels. Suddenly you'd discover a secret, dessert-only stomach you never knew you had. It's a palace miracle. The array of sweetmeats or mithai and other desserts in the Mughal repertoire was as rich and varied as their savory counterparts, a testament to the empire's sweet tooth and the incredible skill of its confectioners. Imagine delicate bowls of firni or kheer, creamy rice puddings cooked slowly with milk, sugar, and fragrant spices like cardamom and saffron, the latter lending a beautiful golden hue and a distinctive aroma. These would often be chilled, sometimes in shallow earthenware dishes that help them set and stay cool, and perhaps garnished with slivered almonds or pistachios, and a touch of edible silver leaf, that vark we've encountered before, shimmering delicately. Then there are the halwas, dense, rich confections made from various ingredients like semolina, suji, carrots, gajar, lentils, dal, or even eggs,
slow cooked with ghee, sugar, milk, and nuts until they achieve a luscious melt-in-your-mouth texture. Each spoonful is a concentration of sweetness and flavor. Some of these sweets were so exquisitely rich, a single bite could probably power a small hummingbird for a week, or at least make you very, very happy in a sugary, blissful kind of way. You'd also encounter an astonishing variety of barfis of other milk-based sweets, cooked down until thick and then cut into diamonds or squares, often flavored with rosewater, kaura, or cardamom, and studded with nuts. There might be vibrant, syrupy jalebis, those intricate swirls of fermented batter fried crisp and then soaked in sugar syrup, a textural delight of crunch and sticky sweetness. Perhaps some gulab jamuns, soft, deep-fried milk solids dunked in a fragrant rose-scented syrup. Fruit, too, played a starring role in the dessert course, beyond just being served fresh. There were candied fruits, or murabbas, where pieces of mango, apple, quince, or even ginger were preserved in a thick sugar syrup, becoming jewel-like and intensely sweet. Fresh fruits like melons, pomegranates, and grapes would also make a reappearance, offering a lighter counterpoint to the richer cooked desserts. And let's not forget the early ancestors of kulfi, a dense, traditional Indian ice cream, made by slowly simmering sweetened, flavored milk until it thickened and reduced, then freezing it in conical molds, often using that same ingenious ice and saltpeter method. The resulting treat was creamy, intensely flavored, and incredibly refreshing. Sometimes you might find faluda, a delightful concoction of vermicelli noodles, basil seeds, tukmaria, rose syrup, and chilled milk or kulfi, a complex and cooling end to the meal. A quirky tidbit about Mughal desserts is the sheer artistry and sometimes competition involved. Different noble households and even different sections of the zenana might pride themselves on their unique recipes for a particular halwa or a specific type of sweetmeat, passed down through generations. The imperial sweetmakers, the halwais, were highly skilled artisans, and a particularly innovative or delicious creation could bring fame and favor. Some desserts were so delicate and labor-intensive that they were reserved only for the most special occasions or for the emperor's personal enjoyment. Historians still engage in scholarly debate about the precise lineage of many Mughal-era sweets. While Persia undoubtedly had a strong influence, particularly with dishes like halwa and perhaps some of the frozen desserts, India had its own ancient and rich tradition of milk-based sweets and sugar confections. The Mughal period was a crucible of culinary fusion, and the dessert repertoire reflects this beautiful blending of cultures, with indigenous techniques and ingredients meeting and mingling with imported ideas. As these sweet delights are savored, the rhythm of the palace begins to change. The earlier buzz of the main meal, the clatter of many dishes, the louder conversations all give way to a more subdued atmosphere. Oil lamps might be trimmed lower, casting softer shadows. The music, if still playing, might shift to gentler, more contemplative melodies. The attendants move with an even quieter grace. After the dessert course, the palace didn't just get quieter. It probably sighed a collective, contented, slightly sticky sigh of satisfaction. Often, following the sweets, pan would be served with great ceremony, its pungent, aromatic flavors cleansing the palate and aiding digestion. Along with pan, or sometimes presented separately, you might find mukwas, a colorful blend of roasted fennel seeds, anise, sesame seeds, and tiny sugar-coated spice seeds, offered as a final mouth freshener. The conversation, too, becomes softer, more leisurely. The pressing business of state, if it was ever discussed at the meal, might now be set aside. This is a time for more relaxed social interaction, for savoring the lingering tastes and the pleasant company. The emperor might retire to his private chambers or engage in quiet conversation with his closest companions. The grand dastarkwan, having fulfilled its purpose, will soon be cleared completely, its treasures consumed or destined for the next stage of their journey as surplus. The scent of lingering spices from the main course now blends with the sweeter, more delicate aromas of rosewater, cardamom, and saffron from the desserts, creating a unique olfactory signature of a meal well concluded. It's a moment of transition from the peak of culinary activity to the encroaching calm of the night. The palace, a city within a city, begins to draw inwards, its energy shifting from the outward projection of power and hospitality to the more private rhythms of its nocturnal life. The sweet retreat of dessert is not just an end to the meal, but a gentle gateway to the quiet hours ahead.
The feasting is done, the last sweet morsel savored, the final sip of perfumed water taken. Around you, the grand palace, once a hive of such focused culinary activity, begins to breathe more slowly, more deeply. The myriad torches and lamps that blazed with such festive intensity are now being gently dimmed by quiet attendants, their flickering lights casting long, dancing shadows that soften the monumental architecture, making the vast courtyards and intricate archways seem almost to sigh with the departing day. The air, still carrying the faint, ghostly perfumes of rosewater from the sherbets, the lingering whisper of cardamom from the biryanis, and the sweet memory of saffron from the desserts, grows cooler, carrying the subtle scent of jasmine blooming in unseen gardens, their fragrance intensifying as night truly takes hold. The cacophony of the kitchens has long since faded, replaced by the distant, rhythmic sounds of cleaning, the soft clatter of pots being scrubbed and stored away, a gentle, winding down music of a massive operation coming to its well-earned rest. The voices you hear now are fewer, softer, the purposeful commands of the day giving way to the more relaxed exchanges of those whose duties extend into the quiet solitude of the night watch. Even the great gates, which earlier pulsed with arrivals and departures, now stand imposing and still, guardians of a sleeping giant. Your own senses, so recently overwhelmed by the rich tapestry of tastes and smells, begin to settle. The dastarhwan, that vibrant canvas of the feast, is now cleared, folded away, leaving behind only the faintest trace of the abundance it held. There is a profound sense of completion, of a grand ritual having run its course. The energy of the palace turns inward, towards rest, towards dreams, towards the silent replenishment needed before the dawn brings its own new cycle of duties and delights. Let the gentle echoes of this magnificent bygone world lull you into a peaceful state, a sweet retreat into your own quiet slumber.